Hello, welcome to another online lecture on computer architecture. In this course, we have been looking at what makes up a computer as we know. We have looked at the various hardware components such as CPUs, memories, and input-output devices, and how these things come together to make up a computer. From there, what we can understand is even though these hardware components are there, it is necessary for some level of software components to come in for us to use those computers effectively. That is where the topic that we are going to look at today is going to be important. So, instruction set architecture is one of the ways how we are going to instruct the hardware components of a computer to do the task that we need as part of our programs or the softwares that we use. So that is what we are going to look at in a bit more detail today. So, what is an instruction set architecture? So, when we say instruction set architecture, before that, let's think about what is the hardware that we have. The main computational hardware, as we know, is the CPU. So, when we have the CPU as the key component there, and after that we have the memory is there and IO devices are there. So these are the three key components that we looked at in the previous weeks. So from this we identified CPU as being the key component that is going to do the computations. So whatever the program that is going to use this computer needs to work with this CPU. So when we say the CPU is the computational device, what do we mean by that? Within that CPU, we are going to have a number of hardware components. So we are going to have a number of circuitries and so on that is going to do various things. That is what we looked at as arithmetic and logic unit and various other components that can do various computational operations. So that is the operations of the hardware within the CPU. So now, whatever the instructions that we give to the CPU will have to correspond to this particular hardware. So whatever the instructions that we give to the CPU will have to depend on whatever the hardware that we have. So that set of instructions is what we would identify as an instruction set. The set of instructions or set of commands that will correspond to the hardware components of a CPU is what we would call as an instruction or instruction set, a collection of them, and things will depend on that particular CPU. And with that, we can also look at two other things. One is machine language and the other one is assembly language. So what we identify as machine language is, it is basically the binary representation of the operations that the CPU can do. So that is the binary instructions that we can give to the CPU. That is the machine language. Then on the other hand, we have what is called assembly language, and assembly language is basically some memorable representations of that machine language or the instruction for the CPU for the purpose of understanding by humans. So what we have here is we have hardware in the CPU that is going to do these operations, and each operation that is supported by the hardware will be identified by an instruction, and those instructions will have a binary representation, a binary code, ones and zeros representation, that we will call machine language, and we will also have a human readable, human memorable representation of that machine language called as assembly language. So this set of instructions that are there in a CPU, the main role of these instructions is a way to bridge the gap between various software components and the hardware component. So we know that the hardware component of the CPU is where the computation is going to happen, and it is the one that is going to implement those computations. You can instruct the CPU directly to machine language instruction, but they are going to be complex and they are going to be complicated for each software developer or each programmer to know and use. So that is where we have the instruction set architecture that is going to be in between the software layer on top and the hardware layer on the bottom, and this is going to sit in between. So what we would have is, we would have the hardware layer including the CPU and memory and so on there. We would have the software layer on top where various operating systems and various other software can be there. And in between these two, we would have the instruction set architecture. So this is the one that is going to be in between, linking up and bottom of the layers of software and hardware. So this instruction set architecture will be specific to that particular CPU and its internal architecture, because instruction set architecture is a collection of instructions, and those instructions will depend on what is there at the hardware layer in the CPU. So each instruction set architecture will depend on what is there implemented in that particular hardware layer. And the main function of this instruction set architecture would be as the bridge between the software layer and the hardware layer, and to enable software developers to easily write programs to a common hardware platform, and also for the hardware developers to not worry too much about the hardware layer, the software layer, and only develop the hardware to match the instruction set architecture. When we think about instructions now, we can look at what are the things that make up such an instruction when we think about an instruction set architecture. The first part of the instruction is what we identify as operation code or opcode. This operation code or opcode is basically the core part of instruction that is giving the operation behind that instruction. These can be things like addition, subtraction, multiplication, and so on. So all these instructions, the operations of that instruction is the opcode. Then we can have operands or things that are giving information to that particular operation. So if we think about an operation like, say, addition, the operands to that addition could be a couple of values. We can say add A and B. So those can be two operands, and that is what we identify as source operands. Then once that computation is done, we may want to store that result somewhere. Say for example, we want to store it somewhere called C. So that is what we would identify as result operand. And in addition to that, we may also have in certain type of instruction a reference to what is the next instruction to go to. So in certain instructions, it may have a pointer pointing to a particular next instruction. So the basic things we will have is the operation code that is specifying what is the instruction doing, then some source information, that is the input information for that particular operation. Then we can also specify where the output needs to be stored, and sometimes we may also have a way to specify what is the next instruction. So that is the basic elements of an instruction that we can have: operation code, operands, both source operands and results operands, and next instruction reference. Now, when we think about designing an instruction set architecture, there are a number of things that we can think about, a number of decision points that we have to think about when we are designing such an instruction set architecture. The first thing would be how many instructions that we are going to have. Say, for example, we can just have addition and multiplication, only 2 instructions. Not practical in a general purpose computer, but that's what we identify by how many operations. And then what are those operations and what they can do. Different operations can do different things, so we can identify what these operations are and what they can do. And we can also specify how complex those instructions can be. Say, for example, we can have an addition instruction, and for that particular addition instruction, we can say it can be a 16-bit adder, it can be a 32-bit adder, or it can be a 64-bit addition. Depending on that, the complexity is going to change depending on the decision that we make there. Similarly, the length of instructions, so for example, again in the same example of addition, if we have, say, 16-bit or 32 or 64-bit addition, then that is the data length that we have for that particular instruction. So that is, for example, if it is a 32-bit addition, so that is the data length that we have there. So depending on the type of instruction, we may have different lengths of words or different lengths of integer values supported in that particular instruction. Then we can also have a decision about what is the format of the instruction going to be. So we can say what is the length of the instruction and what is the length of the operand. So for example, we can say we are going to spend 16 bits for the opcode, and we are going to have another 16-bit for the operands. Or alternatively, what we can do is we can give 16 bits for the opcode and 32 bits for the operands. So different instructions we can design differently, and based on that we will have to decide what are the instruction formats that we are going to support, what are the data types that we are going to support as well. Then one of the other things that would influence the design of these ISAs would be the number of registers that are available in a particular CPU. Because the number of registers in the CPU will dictate how the operations can be performed, because the registers are basically memory locations within the CPU. So these are memory locations within the CPU, and depending on how many of those registers are there, the operations will have to be performed in a certain manner. So that will also influence the particular instruction set architecture. And we will also have different types of addressing modes, which we will discuss a bit later in this lecture. And also One of the other things that we will briefly look at, but you may be discussing this in much more detail later on, that is whether we have reduced instruction sets or complex instruction sets. The main difference between RISC and CISC computers are RISC are reduced instruction sets, so we don't have a large number of instructions, whereas CISC we have a large number of instructions. The trade-off would be RISC computers can be smaller in terms of the hardware that need to be implementing the smaller number of instructions, whereas RISC computers may be needing higher number of or larger hardware or larger CPUs. So that is a brief look at that, but you may be covering that in much more detail in courses like operating systems and so on. So next we can look at different types of instructions, or we can sort of categorize the various instructions that can be available in an instruction set architecture and supported by a CPU into few groups. So the first one are data transfer instructions. The second one is data processing instructions and control instructions. So we will briefly look at what each of these things are. So data transfer instructions are instructions that are about transferring data before and after operations. So for example, we want to store some data from a particular memory location into a register. So from the memory to a register, storing that. Or we want to load something from somewhere. We want to exchange data between two places. We want to move from one place to the other. We want to move the data from one register to the other. We want to clear the data. So if there are data stored somewhere, we want to clear the data that is currently there in a particular register. And then, for example, things like stack operations, we can do push and pop kind of operation. So these are all operations that are transferring data or moving data across the computer, across the CPU, registers and memories. So these instructions are about moving the data. And most of the time in these instructions, we will specify the source of the data. So that is where the data is coming from, the destination of the data, where the data needs to go to, and sometimes the amount of data, that is how much of data that we want to move. We can specify, say, from memory location 1000, move 10 words of data to memory location 2000. So that is basically a move kind of a data operation that we can do. And depending on different instructions, there may be different parameters that we may have to give. Say, for example, for a clear instruction, we only need to give what is the place where we want to clear the data. If you want to move, we may have to give two places, the source and the destination. So depending on the instructions, different parameters may be needed. The next type of operations are what we can identify as input-output operations. So these are operations that are relevant to working with input-output devices or input-output operations. So here we can think of things like moving data. So if you remember memory mapped I/O, in memory mapped I/O, if you remember correctly, what the main thing about memory mapped I/O is, the input-output devices is also sharing the same memory space, and we are able to use the same memory operations to do input output. So in those cases, we may be able to use the data movement instructions to do input output operations. Then we may also have specific instructions in certain situations. And we may also have in certain situations like where we use a DMA controller, direct memory access controller, we may have some specific instructions for those as well. So these are instructions that are there specifically to do input output related operations, so input output related reading, writing, and so on. These operations, these instructions can be categorized separately as well. Then one of the other categories of instructions that we can have are arithmetic operations. So arithmetic operations are basically mathematical operations like addition, subtraction, multiplication, division, and so on. So these are various arithmetic operations that we can have that are there. And also we can have additional instructions like, say, for example, we can have a separate instructions for incrementing, decrementing, changing, negating, and so on. So we can have additional arithmetic instructions as well, in addition to the common instructions such as addition, subtraction, multiplication. The other kind of instructions that we can have are logical instructions. So these are, if you remember your logic operations and so on, like AND, O, NOT, XO, and so on. So these are some bitwise operations that can be done as logical operations. Then it is also possible to do certain shifting operations. Say, for example, if we think about bitwise operations, we can do an AND. So what we will have is 1, 1, and we do an AND, and then we get the results there. Or we get an O and get a results there. So these are bitwise operations. Then we can also have shifting or rotating operations. So these are things like logical shifting operations or arithmetic right-left shift operations. So some of these you may have covered when you are in your previous courses, or we may be looking at some of these in a later part. Then we can also have what is called transfer operations or transfer of control instructions. So these instructions are about, say, if we have a program that is running a set of instructions, and we may want to do certain things from transferring from one point of the program to another. So we may want to jump or skip or so on. So we can have a skip operation, and say, for example, we can do a skip if for example, if the result is 0 of an operation, we can skip to a particular point, or we can branch into a particular instruction. So these are also different types of instructions that can be used for transferring control within a program. So instead of a program going one instruction after the other, we can use these instructions to make the program jump from one place to the other based on certain conditions. So those are some of the various types or categories of instructions that we can have in an instruction set architecture. Now let's look at some of the common formats of instructions or formats of instructions that we can have. So when we say format of instructions, what we are talking here is about what is the bitwise layout of instruction. So what we mean by that is, what we can have is a length of instruction, and each of those bits can be separated and used for different things. So that is what we would identify as the format of the instruction. So if we think about it, what we can basically start with is, say, this is the length of the instruction that we have. So from there, we have to give a portion of it for the operation code. So a portion of it will be the opcode. Then another portion will have to be given to various operands that we may have. So if we have a number of operands, we may have to give certain formats, certain places of that instruction to those as well. So what we will be ending up with is a length of instruction that is now being used for a number of purposes. And within a particular instruction set architecture, we may have different instructions that are following different formats. So for example, if we think about an addition instruction, we at least need, say, the operand opcode. We need the opcode add and at least 2 instructions saying what are the input values there. So for example, if we think about a clear instruction, there we just need to give one place, one memory locations to be cleared of the value register location. So even within the same instruction set, we may have different instructions following different formats. With varying formats of these instructions, what we can also have is that impacting the length of instructions that we have. So the length of instruction will depend on a number of things, such as the memory size of that particular computing device or the CPU supports, how the memory is organized. So for example, what is the addressing mode? Again, we will discuss about addressing a bit later. The bus structure of that computer, the complexity of the CPU, and the speed of the CPU. So all these things will dictate in terms of deciding on the length of the instruction. The reason being, we can have larger instructions or we can have space saving, and both of these things may be needed in different situations. So it is not that we always want one, but depending on the situations, we may want a set of powerful instructions, or sometimes we may want space saving depending on our application. Based on that, we will have to decide what we are going to do and what is the length of the instruction going to be in that particular instruction set architecture. Then when it comes to operands of instructions, again, they can fall into a number of different categories. The first one is addresses. So these are addresses or references to a point in memory. So those can be given as operands. So instead of saying add 2 plus 5, what we can do is 2 can be stored at a particular point in memory, 5 can be stored in another particular point in memory, and then we can give that memory locations as addresses to that particular instruction. We can directly have numbers as the instruction or as the operand. So these numbers themselves can directly be used as the operands. Instead of giving a memory location pointer, we can just give the number itself as the instruction. In certain operations, we can also have characters, like ASCII characters can also be instructions. So things like alphabetical ASCII characters can be instruction. Then we can also have logical data. So that is bitwise logical data of zeros and ones can also be part of instructions or part of operands. So we can have zeros and ones as part of operands giving depending on the type of instruction. Then when it comes to allocating the bits of an instructions to various things, it will depend on what is the addressing mode that is being used, the number of operands that we have, whether the operation is going to, or the instruction is going to take or get things from the register or the memory, the number of registers that we have, like say if we have, and also depending on say to specify the address and the data, the address range that is suitable available there, and then that would dictate what is the length of bits that is needed to specify an address, and the address granularity. So that is what is given by each address, whether it is a byte or whether it is 2 bytes pointed by a single address or whether it is few bits pointed by a single address. So all these things will influence how the bits are going to be allocated to what things. If, for example, depending on the addressing mode, we will have to have part of the operands pointing to something else in the location. So this will be, the operands will be the addresses. So then we will have to have the length of the address there to point to an operand. Then if we have 2 operands or 3 operands or 4 operands, then that will decide again how many bits are needed for that. Say for example, address range or address granularity, again that is going to dictate how many bits are needed for that particular part of the operand, or how many bits are needed to be allocated for that. And another related thing to this is how many number of addresses that are supported. So how many bits are allocated will also depend on how many addresses are supported in the system, and that would depend on how the system is designed. We can have fewer addresses, we can have more addresses, and it is all a design decision that has to be made in terms of designing that particular computer. Say for example, if we have more addresses, then we can specify more complex instructions. If we have few addresses, we will have to have less complex instructions. So the main thing to remember about the number of addresses is it is going to be a decision that is going to be made by the designer in terms of what is preferable for that particular system. If that particular system is more about faster operations or more efficient operations, depending on whether it is going to be a larger computer, a larger CPU or a smaller CPU, all these things are going to influence the number of addresses that are going to be supported by the system. Say for example, what we can have is 3 addresses. So for example, what we would do is, let's say a subtraction operation, and we are giving 3 addresses there. Y is where the result is going to be stored, and then operand A and B that are going to be the operation. So A is going to be subtracted, B is going to be subtracted from A, and the result is going to be stored in Y. So this is a 3 operand or 3 addresses being used. This is not very common, but it can be done. 2 addresses are normally used because what we would do is the same subtraction operation. What we would do is we would start with the 2 operands and we would store the results in one of those. So here we are storing the results in Y, but Y is also used at the starting point. So we start with Y and B, and then after the operation we take the result and store it back in Y. So that is a way to reduce the number of addresses that we use in a particular instruction. So that is using 2 addresses. But the issue is we need some temporary storage until it can be stored in the location. So we have to have some temporary location where the operation result is stored before it is being stored back at that initial address. In certain operations, we can also do with one address. Say for example, if it is a load instruction, what we are doing is we are loading a value from the instruction to a particular point. So here we normally load it to the accumulator register. So what we would do is we would specify only one location or one memory address from where things need to be loaded, and that would be loaded into the accumulator. Then we can also use 0 addresses in certain instructions. So there are few ways this can happen. Say for example, if we are using a stack, for example, here what we would do is we can go with the stack operations, and then without using any particular addresses we can perform the operation. So that is also possible in certain instructions. So as I mentioned before, we will be looking at addressing modes as well, because addressing is a key aspect of instructions, because all these instructions are reading from or writing to these various addresses, memory locations and so on. So addressing mode is going to be an important point to discuss here. So we will look at few different addressing modes now. So there are various addressing modes such as immediate addressing, direct addressing, indirect addressing, register addressing, register indirect addressing, displacement addressing, and stack addressing. We'll look at some of these in a bit more detail now. So, when we say immediate addressing, what we have here in immediate addressing is the operand is part of the instruction. So here, for example, the operand is in this addition instruction, the operand is 5, and the 5 is part of the instruction. So that is part of the instruction. So there's no particular point of pointing to somewhere in a memory location. So there's no memory reference will be made, and there's no reading from a memory location. So that means the instruction can be faster using immediate addressing, but the problem is we cannot do much with this because we will have to have limited range of operations can be performed in this mode. So what we would have is, say for example, again, if you think about the add instruction here, so we have add is the instruction, 5 is the operand that we are giving, and in addition to that we will have the accumulator where some other value is there from a previous operation. So what we would do is we would add these two values. So that is whatever the values that is there in the accumulator with this value, and store the results back again in the same accumulator. So here, because of that, there's no need to reference any particular memory location. So that is immediate addressing, where we are not using any particular address reference and the operand is itself part of the instruction. Then we can have direct addressing. So direct addressing is basically one of the simplest form of addressing. So what we have here is, we have the opcode here, we have the address here, and the address is directly pointing to the operand in the memory. So there's nothing complicated here. So opcode is there, address is there as part of the operand, and that address is pointing to some place in the memory there where the operand is stored. So it is basically the effective address is the location where it is stored. The effective address would be where the address is pointing to in the memory. The main advantage is there's only a single memory reference is needed. So where we need to read is directly given in the instruction itself. So we can just go to that memory place and read. There's no additional calculation is needed to calculate the effective address, because the effective address is the address itself. So there's no computation is needed. But the problem, or one of the limitations could be, it would be limited by the address space that is there. So we are limited by what can be stored in the memory, and only the memory itself. The next one we can have is what is called indirect addressing. And in indirect addressing, what we have is, we have the opcode, and the instruction will point to a particular address. So it is pointing to a particular address. But that particular address, that is not having the operand that we need, that is having another pointer to somewhere else where it is pointing to that particular operand. So in direct addressing, the address directly pointed to the operand itself. In indirect addressing, what we have is the address pointing to somewhere where there is another pointer pointing to the operand. So that is what it is indirect. So it is going from one place to the other and to another place. So with this approach, what we can do is, we can have much larger address space, because we can have one memory and then we can have another memory and we can have pointers pointing to that. So we can have much larger memory space than what we can do with direct addressing. But the disadvantage or the limitation is, we have to do two lookups to get to the operand. We have to first go to the address given in the instruction, then that points to another place where the operand is. So that is indirect addressing. Then we have register addressing, and what register addressing is basically, the instruction is, it is similar to indirect addressing, or it is similar to direct addressing, but here we are pointing to registers. So instead of a memory location, here we are pointing to the set of registers that are there, and the instruction pointer is going to point to a particular location in the register. So it is similar to direct addressing, but using registers instead of the memory. So operand is stored somewhere in the memory, and this is a way the instruction can point to that operand. The limitation is this is limited to the number of registers that we can have. So given most computers will have limited number of registers, so this will be limited to that. And also we can only have we can no need to do any memory access, so it can be much faster, but as I said, it will be limited by the small number of registers that we can have. Then we can have register indirect addressing. So this is a combination in between register addressing and indirect memory addressing. So what we have here is we start with, in the instruction it is pointing to a place in the register. So we go there, and there the register is pointing to somewhere in the memory. So we go there, and there we find the operand. It is similar to indirect addressing or indirect memory addressing, but the first phase we are using the registers instead of a memory location. So again we can have large number of address spaces supported because of this indirect approach, but it is going to be still limited by how many registers that we can have. And one of the other advantages that we would have here is, in indirect memory addressing, both of the accesses were in memory, so that can be much slower, whereas here one of the accesses in the register and the second access is in the memory, so the register access can be much faster than the memory access. Another addressing approach that we can have is what is called displacement addressing. So here we have, in addition to the opcode, we have two components. One is pointing to a register and the other one is pointing to an address. So then the register part, there we will find a displacement value, and then adding that displacement value to the address part in the instruction will point to the place where the operand is. So again, this is a way of doing addressing by way of implementing, where we can have, say, we will look at these in much more detail in operating systems, but and when we are discussing about memory. But the thing to remember here is the register is going to point to a displacement value, and that added to the address will point to the actual location of the operand. Then another addressing mode that we can have is what is called relative addressing. So in relative addressing, what we have is the current instruction is going to be, or the next instruction is going to be offsetted by a particular locations from the current program counter. So what we would have here is, it is a version of displacement addressing, the difference being the displacement is coming from the program counter, or the pointer from the program counter. So that brings us to the end of discussing instruction set architectures. So instruction set architectures are the first layer above the hardware level, that is where the CPU has implemented various operations, and those are exposed through the instruction set architecture layer, and on top of that various computations can, or various programming can be done using those computational operations. And in the next lesson, we will be looking at assembly language programming. So that is a way of utilizing instruction set architectures and doing some level of programming that is much more human friendly or human readable. So that is what we'll be discussing in the coming weeks. And with that, we come to the end of this lecture. And if you have any questions, please let me know. And if you have any feedback, please let me know as well. And until next time, thank you. Bye.